When Nintendo first announced they were releasing the NES Mini, I got super excited. I got even more excited when they announced the SNES Mini, because I was starting to see a bit of a pattern. But they kinda left us high and dry after that. We were kinda hoping for an N64 Mini, there were rumours there was going to be a Gamecube Mini, but none of these things materialised. Instead we got the NSO, the Nintendo Switch Online catalogue, which I'm not going to complain, fine, absolutely perfect. So I done what Nintendo didn't. What to think about that now? And I built my own N64 Mini. Let's see how it's done. So for this build I'm going to use a Raspberry Pi 5. I also ordered the official power brick for it, as well as this Retroflag N64 themed console for the Raspberry Pi 5. I've also got an SD card and the mini HDMI, or micro HDMI, whatever it is, conversion. Now, the big thing for this obviously is this Retroflag N64 case. Now this is so cool, and obviously when I saw it I was like, I need to buy this. This wee bit here was missing, which was a bit of balls, but apart from that, like, it's absolutely pristine, it's so cool, and the colours, like, the colours are absolutely bang on. And I showed it to James, and James, he made a good point in saying that this is the kind of thing that Nintendo might kind of be all over at some point, so that kind of made me realise I needed to kind of jump the gun. So with this bit missing, I was actually fortunate enough to kind of print off this wee bit. It wasn't anything massive. It's a pain in the arse that it wasn't included. It must have been missing, but look, whatever his was. Also printed this wee kind of part game shell, just to kind of make it look like there's a game inside it. It all goes in the dark, so that's just extra cool bonus points, I suppose. But before we get into actually building this thing, I want to take a minute to talk about our sponsor, PCBWAY. So if you're a bit of a tinkerer like me who gets involved in all these stuff for a hobby, or if you're a professional engineer working on your next big project, you really need to check out PCBWAY. They've got high quality, affordable PCBs and a whole ton more. Now they do specialise in precision PCB prototyping, starting for just $5, but that's not all they offer. They've got loads of assembly services for small runs of stuff, as well as full-scale productions. They also source all the components you need and do everything in the manufacturing assembly stage for you. That's not all, they also offer 3D printing services and CNC machining services, which is something I would like to take advantage of in the future. And if you need your project done fast, PCBWAY is lightning fast turnaround times with prototypes ready in as little as 24 hours. So please visit the link in the description below and turn your ideas into reality. Thank you PCBWAY for sponsoring the video, and now let's get back to this build. So the main component for this outside the shell is going to be the Retro. It's going to be the Raspberry Pi 5. Now I've tinkered about with Raspberry Pis a load in the past, but this is the first kind of high spec, high powered Raspberry Pi that I've actually used. I've had the Zeros and the 0W2s and the Picos, which obviously I've used a lot. I've used a lot in other videos. I've used the 3A plus, 3 plus era model it's called, for a similar project when I'd done a Doom SNES cart for Chris. I'll throw a link up in the corner for that. Assembly for this was super simple. Everything was included with the case that you're going to need, including heat sinks, thermal pads, all the screws and all the good stuff. And it's really simple to connect everything. There was just a kind of couple of plugs and you're pretty much good to go after that. So I'm attaching the heatsink here now, which I think is vital because there is a lot of heat that comes off of this thing. It is processing mad. And one thing I liked about the shell is it had a built-in fan as well, just above where the heatsink is going to go. So when you first switch this thing on, you can hear it. You can hear the fan powering up. And it does kind of get a bit warm, but it's not ridiculously hot, so I'd say that's fine. So once that's kind of all attached and plugged in, there's just a few screws to attach the Raspberry Pi 5 to the top of the shell, and then just a few more screws to attach to the bottom of the shell. And once that's done, that's it all set up, looking absolutely spanking. I love the look of this thing so much. And like I said, the functioning on-off switch and the reset button is just a cool wee touch. So now that's done, we'll get it kind of powered up here, and we'll get Batocera installed onto the SD card. Now I went with Batocera instead of RetroPie because I've heard a kind of lot of mixed things with RetroPie not being kind of stable enough on the Raspberry Pi 5 yet. I don't think there's an official release of the image yet. So when kind of looking at bits for this video, everybody was recommending Batocera, so I thought I'd check it out, and I'm so glad I did. So the first thing we're going to do is when you go to the Batocera website, there is a how to install tab. I am going to recommend that you click on that because it gives you links and all the kind of steps to install. Now it is super easy. You're going to download the Raspberry Pi imager. You're going to download the Batocera image for the downloads page, which I'll throw links and everything down below, and then you're just writing it to the SD card, which is no problem. Now when I was writing mine, it hung on 99% for about 5 minutes, and then I got stuck on verifying for about another 5 minutes, so I thought it crashed a couple of times, but unlike me, I thought I'd be patient and I left it, and then it eventually clicked on. So I'd say just give it a wee bit of time. So like I said before, I'm using the official Raspberry Pi power brick for this just because, and just like that, Batocera is installed, and my god, it's actually gorgeous. It does, I think its back end is still an emulation station. I'm not entirely sure now. I do need to kind of investigate this a bit more myself, but it does have a whole load of cores on it for emulators. Like, there's a ton of stuff. So before we do anything, I'm going to set up the Wi-Fi, get the thing updated, get my controller added properly. Now I'm going to be using my PlayStation 4 controller, and kind of go through the themes, and then we'll get some ROMs transferred over. So when I've been transferring my ROMs, I've been just using it over FTP. So if you open your browser, go / and then Batocera. Now I typed all mine in block capitals because that's the only way I could ever get it to load, and I'm not sure if it's case sensitive, but once you've typed that in, wait a second for it to connect, and then you'll see a folder called ROMs, and then you click that, find the appropriate folder, and then just dump all your ROMs in there, and then you'll be good to go. And then once everything's transferred over, you just restart it or reset the game list, and it'll repopulate everything then, and then you can scrape all the games to get all the artwork. And the first thing I wanted to try here was the Sega Saturn, because I know there was a lot of issues in the past with Sega Saturn being kind of difficult to emulate, and this was kind of the first big test I wanted to throw it just to see how well it handled it. And I made a few kind of changes to the emulator, and they were not for the better. So what I ended up doing was just kind of putting everything back to stock, just kind of default settings, and it all worked fine. I think I tinkered a bit with the upscaling and anti-aliasing, but besides that, it wasn't anything massive. Like, it's Sega Saturn, it's not going to look the best, like, but I was genuinely surprised at how well it managed to handle Sega Saturn. So then, out of kind of sense of obligation, I tried some PSP, and this is where I ran into my first couple of problems, mostly with input latency. It was noticeably delayed, and it did kind of cause a bit of issues. You'll see here with Ghosts and Goblins, this is the game you need to be on point with, and it was very, very noticeable. Now, I kind of went through the settings and I got things a lot better. I'm not sure what the issue was, but look, it's fixed. After that now, I needed to try Dreamcast again. This was one of the harder to emulate systems back in the day, especially on some of the Raspberry Pis. But as you can see here with Dolphin Blue, it's running absolutely smoothly. So based on that, I wanted to try a 3D game, and what other better game than Crazy Taxi? I absolutely love this game, so I had to try this. And as you can see here, it runs absolutely perfectly. And now I'm more kind of fast-paced game, and anytime I talk about Dreamcast, I have to play Cannon Spike. This was always one that had kind of rendering issues and stuff like that for some of the other Raspberry Pis. And again, with Tony Hawk here, I wanted to try a kind of quicker game just to make sure there's no jittering, and it all run absolutely smoothly. So the Raspberry Pi 5 Batocera handled the Dreamcast, no issues that I've found so far. Then I wanted to try some kind of more obscure emulators now. I would try Virtualboy because randomly this has been difficult for systems you emulate in the past. A lot of jittering, frame skipping and stuff like that, because I think it's because of the parallax effect and stuff like that. But the Raspberry Pi 5 handles it absolutely no issues. Which is actually, it's surprising this was so hard to emulate because it's just red and black. Again, I'm not sure if it's because of the front and back displays or whatever, but look, Raspberry Pi 5 sorted. Then again, I do try some Atari 2600, some Battlezone. I knew this wouldn't be any issues. There would be zero problems with Atari 2600. I just wanted to play Battlezone because it's, I think, the best Atari 2600 game. Now, the Nintendo DS, this was one I was excited to try as well. I know I'm saying that about every emulator on this, but like, I was genuinely excited to try the DS because this is something that doesn't really get emulated that much outside PC. And the only kind of issue I had with this, and it's a very minor one, was the touchpad on the PlayStation 4 controller worked as the touchpad for the bottom screen of the DS. And that's all good in theory, but you have to kind of keep it held down. And I know this is going to sound stupid, but like, I started getting a sore finger and it was just a bit of a pain in the arse. But with Diddy Kong Racing here, there was absolutely zero problems. So DS, the couple of games that I tried with this, no problems. And then I've played probably one of the worst handhelds ever, called Gamecom. My god, what an absolute pile of garbage this was. This was meant to be a competitor to the Game Boy back in the day, not a hope. I tried some Duke Nukem, standard, fantastic game. It's a first person shooter. Brilliant series, but this Gamecom thing was absolute garbage. There was Duke Nukem, there was a load of games released for it, like, I say a load, there was like 20 odd games released for it. One of them was Resident Evil 2, randomly. Now, the Game Boy didn't get a Resident Evil 2 game, but if this is how it would have turned out, I'm glad it didn't. But that's made a gripe for this Gamecom thing. The Raspberry Pi 5 handled it. Zero problems. So, Gamecom, nah. And then I wanted to try some of the kind of harder, kind of more recent consoles. So I tried GameCube, and for the most part, F-Zero worked here. Now again, this is the kind of fast-paced, high-render game. There was a load of slowdowns, and there was a lot of issues with the music and things like that. Is it playable? F-Zero specifically? I think it is. If you're not really listening to it, it is a wee bit slow. But again, it's a fast game, and I think there's a lot to render. Anytime there was something, every time there was a lot of things on the screen, it chugged. But when I booted up Luigi's Mansion here, there was no problems. The only issue I saw here was with the torch. It was like a solid white colour, whereas like it's transparent in the actual game itself. Well, it's like semi-transparent in the game itself. But outside that, it's entirely playable. Like, there's no issues. And then I tried some Wii, and oh my god, I could not believe this worked. Again, the gyro in the PlayStation 4 controller worked as the pointer, as the Wii remote, and it took a bit of getting used to, and it keeps kind of losing its position. Like, I actually found that I was rotating the controller as I was moving, and then I kind of had to point it forward, and then it would reset. So I don't know if there's probably a button you can use to set it back to center. But look, again, I'm not going to diss the controller. The controller's something you can get used to. The fact this could run Wii is bananas. This is a tiny board, like it's the size of a credit card, like, and it's running Wii really well, surprisingly well. And again, I tried some House of the Dead. I wanted to try some on the rails shooters. This took a bit of getting used to, but again, it's just all controllers and buttons. There was some kind of lag, some kind of chug, but it wasn't game breaking. It was few and far between. It happened nonetheless, but it wasn't enough for it to kind of put me off. So like, I will definitely be trying some more first person shooters and some more Wii on this thing. The whole reason you came to this video in the first place was to see how it handled the N64, and I'm not going to lie, I kept this to last entirely on purpose, because the N64, in my opinion, is the best, and I wanted to kind of give this a lot of attention. And the first game obviously to try was going to be Mario Kart 64. Best game, best, I wouldn't even say that actually, no, I'm taking that back. It's one of the best games to test because of this screen here. Apparently in other emulators, something to do with the buffer or whatever it is, it doesn't load, so it's usually just black. So anytime I'm using an emulator and I see that working as it should, instant points, instant points. V-Rally 2 here, one of the most beautiful looking games on the 64, upscaled here. It looks amazing. Like, I'm actually so stoked to how this turned out. There's a lot of kind of settings in the emulator you can kind of go through, anti-aliasing and stuff. My god, I'm going to try. Now, Resident Evil 2 has always had issues with emulation for me, or for emulators in general back in the day, because they didn't really render any sprites on the screen, just the pre-rendered backdrops. So it didn't work here. I'm going to go through some of the settings to see if I can get it to work. And now, some GoldenEye. Again, upscaling this, seeing how it goes. I cannot complain. Again, kind of getting used to controls. It's a minor thing, but when you kind of go through the controls and the settings, like the retro pad setup that they have as like a default is actually mapped really well. It's just a case of getting used to it, I think. But GoldenEye here looks glorious. The way it's upscaled, it's all smooth, it runs fast, there's no lag. Absolutely amazing. I am delighted with this thing. So that was my N64 Mini. Now, it's not exactly officially an N64, but this is probably the closest thing that we're going to get to an N64 Mini, and I think it's going to be, I think it's a lot better for what it offers and stuff like that. And the Raspberry Pi 5 is an absolute game changer. Some of the emulators that you can run on this and some of the prospects that this thing has, I've seen a PS2 emulator running, like it's in very early stages, but it's running regardless, it's running some games. I'd say there's a lot of potential left in the Raspberry Pi 5, and it's getting me excited for what could possibly be a Raspberry Pi 6, which will probably come out in the future at some point. But so far, what this offers is absolutely amazing, and the N64 shelf Retroflag is absolutely, it's just so cool. It's just annoying, this bit. I don't know what the deal with this bit was. This bit was missing, but luckily I had the 3D printer in my hand to kind of print the missing bits, so I'm going to leave it here. Guys, thanks a million for watching. Please let me know down below if you've messed around with the Retro Pi 5, if there's anything you can recommend that I do or check out for it, because I feel like I've only just kind of scratched the surface. Until next time, bye for now.